Greetings, friends, and welcome back to the Musings from the Mount podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Carenza. As we navigate the early days of 2025 with its rapid changes, Michael Lindfield and I decided to take a fresh look at the American dream, what it has meant, and what it could mean going forward. In this conversation, we explore the emotional glamours that distort our understanding of success, happiness, and fulfillment through the techniques and teachings of Alice Bailey as a framework. From our pre-Copernican mindset that places the self at the center of the universe, to our tendency towards rugged individualism rather than rugged community, we examine how these patterns might evolve as we face the challenges of our time. So join us for a thoughtful exploration of how we might move from the planet of self toward a more heart-centered vision of society. And we hope you enjoy the podcast. And if you do enjoy this podcast, please consider going to meditationmount.org and donating. Your donation helps us to bring you this podcast, as well as all the other programs the Mount produces, both today and in the future. We're incredibly grateful and honored by your support. Now, back to the podcast and an exploration of the American dream. We're recording this in the early days of 2025, which has started out with quite a bang. And you can hardly sit for 2 seconds without some kind of news flash coming across that's shaking up, all these ideas. So, if we're reimagining things, if we're reconsidering things, we thought, what the American dream, what is it? What does that even mean now? And we'll get into that. But in discussing this, we talked about, or we ended up on this idea of some of the glamours. And so we're actually kind of looking at restructuring and re-examining the roots of all these ideas. And when that brings up the idea of context. And so you were talking about earlier how for the longest time, we thought we were the center of the universe. Mm-hmm. Like not only just on Earth, but more specifically, certainly in the case of royalty, they thought they were the center of the universe.
Right.
And so as our perspective changes and widens, and we have to reconsider some of these ideas, and almost in a telescoping way, in a much quicker way than we would have maybe imagined. We're still considering the ideas of the Greeks, philosophically, and we're contemplating these ideas from all the ancient texts of their various religious doctrines and dogmas. But now we're doing this in such a rapid fashion. So, as the fires below us are burning in LA, and we have wind and earthquakes and things are really being shaken up. It's okay time to ask. Even the concept of happiness.
Well,
what does that mean?
Wow, you've opened up not just a huge portal, but Pandora's box.
Yeah, there we go.
I think it's Pandora's box.
Yeah,
because what you're saying is that it's our understanding of things that have gotten fixated, mm-hmm. that are getting in the way, not life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's our interpretation of that that somehow is blocking the free circulation of what truly is nourishing, mm-hmm. and what truly is a source of happiness. Mm-hmm. And I'm going back to, Copernicus, the pre-Copernican mindset that said, as you indicated, that the earth is the center of everything. Everything revolves around the earth. I believe that mindset is still prevalent, mm-hmm. because there are many humans for whom life revolves around the planet of self. Mm. Yeah. And it's just a stage.
Right.
It's just a point of view. You actually believe that you are the center and everything is there to support you and supply you with what you need. And if you don't have it, you complain. And when you get it, you believe you have achieved the dream. Mm-hmm. So this whole notion of breaking free of this idea that you and I are the center of the universe. In a non-linear universe, the center is everywhere. Mm. But when the center is only one place, one person, one nation, it starves the rest. Mm-hmm. I mean, everything else is impoverished
Right.
at the expense of that which stands at the center. So whether it's royalty or the few that stand at the center with all the money and those around who don't have it. And before it was said, well, if you work a little harder, then you have the opportunity to achieve this. Well, you and I know there's only place for a few people on the top of the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
But in the valley, there's a lot of places.
Yeah.
So we can't all stand on the top of the mountain together, but we can stand on the top of the mountain as far as the mountain of aspiration. And yet, once we have reached that understanding of what happiness is, how do you make it real? And one of the things, particularly coming out of the Second World War, because that was also a time of rebuilding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we had the industrialization of the world had happened because the war production had created very efficient systems.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was to produce consumer goods.
Mm-hmm.
People wanted televisions, people wanted washing machines, and they were there to give it. There's nothing wrong with that. It was to meet basic needs.
Right.
So when my understanding of the pursuit of happiness is the pursuit of possessions, it devalues that original notion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that seems to be what it shifted to very quickly. Our definition of happiness seemed to be, possession of various plastic things. And not to we all like our things. There's nothing. We're not looking to trade and go back into living in the cave. But at a certain point, you reach a certain threshold. And you've got your basic needs met. You've got your sort of second, third level needs met. What's left now? And and that's, I think, the interesting thing about the glamours that you brought up is like
Right.
we're operating under these kind of illusions and disillusionments.
Well, that's it. And we touched on a podcast about 6 months ago. The Kingdom of Bhutan measures its wealth as gross national happiness,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
not GNP.
Right.
Not gross national product, gross national happiness. How happy are the people as a result of the kind of society we've created? That's how you understand true wealth. And so I think what we're seeing now, the whole pursuit of materialist goals is running its course. Well, you're going to run out of some of the resources, and you've got a lot of rare metals now that everyone needs for their iPhones or smartphones. You've got to come up with another way of supporting the well-being of humanity without depleting its resources and without depriving each other of the essential needs of life because somebody can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
This is where we get into tricky territory because there is this belief. Take, for instance, capitalism. And we're not going to say it's good or bad. We just say capitalism has a certain belief around it about the distribution of wealth, the generation of wealth. And I go back to Margaret Thatcher and her trickle-down theory. Well, if the people at the top are really rich, well, eventually it will reach the people at the bottom.
Yeah, that didn't work out that great, I guess.
No. No, because...
I'm saying that somewhat facetiously.
It's a political pyramid scheme.
The trickle was dammed up, so they built a dam.
Yeah. So we're not here to pass judgment on what is happening, but just to say, did we get it right? Our dream. What is a dream? If I look inside my heart, what is the dream for me? Is to live in peace. Is to live in joy. It's to live in an atmosphere of loving kindness with my fellow humans, period. Now, how do I get there? Well, the first place I have to start is working on Michael and getting rid of all the things that say that I deserve this more than somebody else, or I have to dismantle those things that are obstructing the free flow of happiness, wealth, for the whole of our humanity. That's radical. And why we're touching on this today, Joey, is because we've been watching the fires in and around LA and how they've just destroyed whole neighborhoods, razed them to the ground, absolutely obliterated huge neighborhoods. And people are like the American spirit, well, we're going to rebuild. Rebuilding is going to be huge. The systems are down. Yeah, there is the will to rebuild, but does our current system, whether it's the economic system, the way that we have insurance coverage, do these systems allow us to rebuild in a healthy, wholesome way as one community? And we had examples last week of a lot of tension because people were losing their homes, and those that could afford it were actually hiring private firefighters to come and protect their homes. It's sort of, for some people, that's, well, if you can afford it, why not? For other people, that goes against the spirit of community. But is the spirit of community truly alive where you have the aggrandizement of the self?
Yeah, these are good
rugged
questions.
Individualism. We haven't shifted to rugged community.
Yeah, I mean, that is the quintessential American, type, the rugged individualist. And, it served a timely purpose, obviously, as the westward expansion and, perhaps the time has kind of, come up. Maybe it's time for a shift. And I think that's kind of what we've been looking at, is that it seems like there is a paradigm shift that is inviting us to partake. It's the next turn of the spiral.
Yeah, and we use the example of Copernicus because that was an obvious one. I mean, he was seen as a heretic. To actually say that, no, the sun is the center of the solar system and we revolve around this. To actually say to somebody, no, you're not the center of the universe. We are part of this constellation of beings, a community of stars, a community of life that is moving together in a spiral fashion around a greater stellar space. And that, when you translate that into terms of society, changes how you show up, changes the laws, it changes the systems, the monetary system.
Yeah.
Now, if you try to change the monetary system and the political system when it's held in place by old beliefs, you're going to enter a battle zone.
Right.
So how do you dissolve the illusion of the planet-centered universe of self?
That's a very good question, because that seems like we trip up on that,
Well, we could turn back to our favorite reference we've got.
Yes.
We've been doing Ponder on This. Every now and again, we dive into Ponder on This, which is a compilation taken from the Alice Bailey writings, The Master DK. And we've touched on glamour and illusion before, a couple of years ago in a podcast, but I think it's time to bring that out again and look at it in a collective sense, but then to say, well, what are some of the glamours and illusions that maybe I am living inside that are distorting my worldview, that are not allowing me to truly nourish myself and be part of the nourishing of my community? So we could take a look at that. And how we've done this before is that we'll read a paragraph and we'll stop, we'll unpack it, we'll maybe tell some stories that come to mind from it. And then we'll go on with our journey. It's as though we're doing walkabout in the new world.
That's right.
So this is an extract on glamour that the Master DK, the Tibetan, came up with. Glamour has oft been regarded as a curious attempt of what are called the black forces to deceive and hoodwink well-meaning aspirants. Many fine people are almost flattered when they are up against some aspect of glamour, feeling that their demonstration of discipline has been so good that the black forces are interested sufficiently to attempt to hinder their fine work by submerging them in clouds of glamour. Nothing could be further from the truth. That idea itself is part of the glamour of the present time and has its roots in human pride and satisfaction It is illusion on the astral plane. Basically saying, if you think you're this important, we're all important.
Mm-hmm.
And we go back to humility. Humility is an adjusted sense of right proportion. It's true that when you start to shine your light in the world and be a force for good, the counter forces are attracted. That's sort of the law of nature. We know that. But sometimes to believe that all the things that are happening to you are because you're a shining light and it's trying to be snuffed out, that actually is like spiritual conceit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's...
it is interesting because every once in a while you run across somebody who views the world in that sort of adversarial way, like, tilting at windmills, kind of, like this quest. And there is something to that, the hero's journey. It's a good allegory, good way to kind of describe someone's path through life. But at times you have to wonder too, when you step back and look at that, you're like, oh, well, how much of this is you just kind of like creating this for yourself?
Yeah, and yet there are other parts of the Tibetan's writings where he said, we're up against retrogressive forces.
Sure.
There are those forces, those levels of consciousness, willful consciousness, that are hell-bent, if you like, on delaying and thwarting the liberation of the human spirit. Mm-hmm. So it goes back to liberty, freedom. Because if I want control, then I can't give you your freedom. Mm-hmm. So it's a natural reaction of the forces of materialism that these are embodied forces. Mm-hmm. Materialism is an embodied force, and those consciousnesses that, if you like, are active on part of materialism, they want everything to be inside the gravitational field of matter. Mm. And we actually are on the path of evolution now. Mm-hmm. There was a time when spirit needed to come into matter and it needed to be involved. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The involution.
Yeah. But now the shift is more away from the material.
Yeah. So I've heard the description of evil is simply an energy out of time and out of place. Mm-hmm. This is not what's needed now. What's needed now is the liberation, it's loving kindness, it's everything that will free us up to create a society that allows us to demonstrate, as we go back to the Greek Trinity, you mentioned the Greeks earlier, of truth, goodness, and beauty. Mm-hmm. That lies at the heart of who we are as a humanity, and each person has a different variation on that theme, different color to bring, a different sound to bring, and all people are needed to give full expression to truth, goodness, and beauty. That's the beautiful thing about it, is everybody has a unique contribution and to bring it through. But when you're in a society that says, this is how you're supposed to act, this is what success looks like, somehow you've been subverted, and all your energy goes into acquisition. And acquisition is very different from a life lived as a creative artist of the soul. Mm-hmm. When you wake up and say, what can I do today that brings more joy to myself and others?
Yeah. It's quite a difference if you just kind of have to put it in two categories between acquisition and creation. It's two very different energies. And because the creation, you can be creating more joy, more love, more community. It's something that's a multiplying effect. Whereas acquisition is you seem to be taking away from the system.
Well, and in the corporate world, I was part of several mergers and acquisitions.
Right.
It's basically legalized stealing.
Yeah.
Slightly exaggerated, but it's like, come on. So if you look at acquisition, what is acquisition? If you go back to the spiritual notion that you receive by giving, it's in giving that you receive. Therefore, as you give and are generous, part of a generous universe, you will receive from life what you need because you have been given the ability to give to others. Therefore, you don't have to acquire. You receive as a result of giving. So acquisition dissolves. Acquisition is not part of the current or the future model.
Yeah.
You acquire something by attracting it to you, not by going out and getting it or taking it.
Right.
I know we're being overly simplistic, but I think what we're saying is that the new society that is seeking to be built cannot be built on a planet-centered self. If we think the planet of self is the center of the universe, it won't work. So we have to move from this ego-centric to eco-centric, where we see each of us as part of this constellation of humanity in cooperation with the other lives for whom Earth is their home. Not just their home, but Earth itself is a sentient being, and all of the lives inside it are aspects of itself. So really, we are being kind, not just to the planet, but we are expressing the kindness of the planet when we are loving and kind to each other and to all beings. We're allowing the planet to be filled with loving kindness, which is its nature. And at the moment, it's not able to circulate that energy around its system because it's being distorted. So you mentioned, we mentioned glamours, and there's some personal glamours, but there are a couple of more general statements that we could make about glamour and then dive into it. Wow, which ones to pick? They're all very juicy. It says, glamour veils and hides the truth behind the fogs and mists of feeling and emotional reaction. It is of unique and terrible potency, owing to the strength of human nature to identify itself with the astral nature and to the vital nature of conscious and sentient response itself. Glamour can only be dissipated by the inflow of clear, directed light. This is true of the life of the individual or of humanity as a whole.
Yeah, that's a little bit of the sunlight is the best disinfectant right there.
Thank you, Joey. It is, because I know when I'm in a dream and it's a sort of, you wake up, oh my God, you're in some weird dream, and then it's a new day. The light's coming through the window, and it's like, okay, and it dispels the shadows, which have been generated. We talked before about Hollywood and the movie industry that has a lot of computer-generated images, some of which are not factual. They're imaginal.
Right.
And a lot of them are imagining a more dystopian than a utopian version. And so we create computer-generated images. Well, we do the same with our own mind. The computer of the lower mind, the brain. We generate images, and then we believe them to be true, and then we live inside the matrix.
Yeah. That is an interesting concept, how we're all creating this matrix that we live in, and it is fictional. It's a story that we tell ourselves, and each day we wake up and we assume that story again. And the way to break free of that, is the disillusionment of these glamours.
I don't want people who are listening to think that we're pointing our fingers at institutions and people outside of ourselves.
Oh no, yeah.
I think we need to look at how do each of us, how do you and I do a glamour check?
Yeah. Well, I think that's actually really important because it's very easy to sort of lay blame and sort of it's the fault of the billionaires or the whatever, but all of that is external to all the huge amount of work and progress that you can make just internally. And like, it's weird how we're talking about things being, centered on a person or heliocentric or earth-centric, but it does still start with the work that you're going to do internally.
Right, because we're representatives of life.
Yeah. Well, it's also like if you imagine, like a modern television, a flat screen, have all these little pixels. Well, if one pixel's out, man, it's annoying. It doesn't totally, but like, so if you're taking yourself out of this group project, it leaves this hole in the picture.
It's a U-shaped hole.
Yeah. And like, so it really is important for each person, especially people who are inclined to listen to this podcast, like you're being called to work on this.
Well, that's why the Tibetan wrote a book. Well, actually, Alice Bailey wrote the book on the problems of humanity, taken from all the writings. And the big one was glamour, the distortion of our beliefs. So we have these beliefs of what things are, and if they're not true, but we hold them to be true, and therefore we base everything off of that image. But it's a false image. Therefore, the forms that we create from that image are out of true.
Yeah.
They don't reflect the truth. So the Tibetan gives 9 glamours that each of us are susceptible to.
Yeah. And we went over a couple of those things before we started, and boy, did they all just ring true. Both
my God, I resemble that remark. Yeah.
But also just for the moment that we're in, we're just like, okay, we're not going to name names, but you can assign these to whatever entities, forces, and personalities are out there in the world. But I mean, this is right on the nail head right there.
Well, as we've said earlier, that every person is playing out an aspect of the highest aspiration, but also playing out an aspect of that which has to be redeemed. Goes back to all the players on stage contain both the final scene, which is the culmination and the bringing together of everything. But in order to get there, you've got to go through all the shadows. You've got to go through all the acting out and the playing out of the darkness and bringing light into that darkness. So each of us is on stage, but inside of us, this drama is being played out. And so the Tibetan gives these 9 glamours. I like to go through them and then invite all of us to say, to what degree is that true in me? If I can even see it. Because sometimes the mist is so thick, it's like, no, I don't see any mist.
Yeah. Well, and that's where you find the places that need the most work, is right, and woof.
Well, in the esoteric psychology that the Tibetan brought through, it's called a blind spot.
Sure.
And people say, no, I don't have that. Well, I don't have a blind spot. No. The reason it's called a blind spot is because you don't see it. You can't say, I don't have a blind spot.
Yeah. That's true.
In fact, the Tibetan said he did that same thing with his master. His master said, I think you got a blind spot. No, I've not got a blind spot. Then his master pointed out the blind spot and he went, oh, right, you're right. Yeah. It wasn't bad. It wasn't, putting him down. It was just saying, look, we don't see everything. We can't quite see round corners yet.
Yeah.
We don't see holistically. Yeah. So anyway, here we are. Number 1, the glamour of destiny. This is a glamour which indicates to the one whom it controls that he has important work to do and that he must speak and work as destined. This feeds a pride which has no foundation in fact. But there's always some truth in this because each of us has a part to play. Each of us has a destiny. But when we aggrandize it and make it the center of everything. Well, this is my destiny, and out of the way, I've got to fulfill my destiny. It's a glamour, and it takes away from the ability to work with others because you separate yourself out.
That's right. Yeah, even though you have that's interesting because even though you have a part in the play, you're not the entire play. And I think that's where we get mixed up, is we think, okay, so maybe it was my destiny to be the lead in the play, but if without the rest of the people, it's just a one-person show.
But the lead isn't the top. The lead is the most visible portrayal of the story.
Yeah.
But the whole story is the whole cast.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. Without the rest of the cast, you're just up there playing by yourself.
Yes. Like the monologues.
Yes.
Are you ready to move to number 2, Joe?
Yeah. Let's move.
The glamour of aspiration. Those thus conditioned are completely satisfied and preoccupied with their aspiration towards the light and rest back upon the fact that they are aspirants. Such people need to move onward on the path of discipleship and cease their preoccupation and satisfaction with their spiritual ambitions and goals.
Mm.
Don't get caught up in yourself.
Yeah.
Don't take yourself personally. Yes, we are evolving. We are on a path. We are unfolding. But it's not in a way that we compare. It shouldn't separate us from or make us, better than or lower than. It's a fact that all life evolves, and at different rates. But in the end, what is being revealed is the one original dream. And it needs everybody to fulfill that. And we're going to arrive at that fulfilling of the dream at different seasons, different pace.
Yeah.
And yet, along the way, I can get self-absorbed. I guess this is the thing of glamour for me, is if I become self-absorbed, which is really when myself is the planet at the center of the universe.
Right. Yeah, and this can be a kind of a quicksand for people in the spiritual path, in the spiritual community. Is becoming too wrapped up in this idea of yourself as, this on this spiritual path, on the spirit. Sometimes you just need to get on with it. Like, yeah. I mean,
I remember a couple of years ago, I was saying, help me understand what shall I do next? And that's sort of, I heard these words come through my, Michael, just do the work.
Yeah.
For God's sake, just do the work.
Sometimes you need that. Like, it seems so obvious, but the concept of do the next right thing. So it's amazing how often that is the best advice you can give. Like, just do the next right thing. It doesn't matter how big or small.
Well, because you're acting directly from your inside.
Right. And there's something too about being in action. It opens up so much more energy, so much more possibility.
If I'm not in action, if I'm just sitting around contemplating the fact that I'm a world server without doing anything, then it becomes separated from life. I'm not actually doing anything.
And this is kind of actually the bane of also someone who has a very intellectual brain.
Yeah.
And, you can become satisfied with just thinking, like, oh, look at all these different ways I can think. And this has been my blind spot. It's like, oh, I can think of 6 ways to Sunday that this could, instead of just doing one thing, doing the next thing.
And I believe when we do the next thing, guided from the highest point we can inside of ourselves, the next step will be revealed automatically. So here we go, number 3, the glamour of self-assurance, or of what might be called the astral principles of the disciple. This is the belief, in plain language, that the disciple regards that his point of view is entirely right. This again feeds pride and tends to make the disciple believe himself to be an authority and infallible. It is the background of the theologian.
Ooh. Yeah, we see a lot of that. Yeah, it's also probably the background of that. I would call that the expert culture that we sometimes fall into. We defer our own agency to people who are experts without really looking into what makes you an expert.
What I loved about the definition, of an expert when I was working in the corporate world, and we were doing using the Toyota model for quality improvement. There was this Japanese saying that said, in the expert's mind, there are few possibilities. In the beginner's mind, there are many.
Yeah.
Because the expert already knows what is and what isn't. Therefore, it's come to this understanding. Therefore, it's fixed it in time and space. There's no more possibility around it. But a beginner's mind, beginner doesn't mean you're not wise. Beginner is you approach every single day, every single moment with an openness for the unexpected, the unusual to come in. The expert already knows it's a premeditated approach rather than a meditated approach, which is the beginner's mind. Anything else you want to add?
No, that's I like that one, though. That's a good one.
Oh, here's one. I think we all can relate to. The glamour of duty.
Ooh.
This leads to an overemphasis of the sense of responsibility, producing lost motion and the emphasis of the non-essential.
Mm. This one's
Tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah, because this is particularly true because we have that, we have that devotional sense, like sort of a national character, and when devotional duty, that that one rings home true as well.
Well, and I remember when I was living in Scandinavia, in Sweden, on the coins, it says plikten framför allt. Duty comes first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, duty is an interesting concept, especially through the lens of the American ideal. Where do you owe your duty to? I mean, in the past, it was very clear. First, it was your tribe or your family. Then it was your kingdom or your lord. But now it's like, where do you owe your duty?
Well, if the Marines, it was the core. It was God and family in that order.
Yeah. So where do we, if we are moving to eco-centric, where does the duty lie?
But is duty if you like, well, how would you describe it? It's a list of priorities. This comes number one. This is number two, number three.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you think about it too, and just in terms of like a sorting machine, but for energy, like where is your first burst of energy allotted to?
Well, you go back to Shakespeare, to thine own self be true. Mm-hmm. Our first duty is to be true to ourselves, because if we're not true to ourselves, what we give is not authentic.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think that's the twist, though, is that because all of this dances so delicately between just the heliocentric and the all these different points of view, but it's so you're first knowing thyself so that you can be a better transmitter of more like higher quality pure energy.
But knowing thyself could be, I am not the center of the universe. I am part of something greater. So it could actually deflate the overinflation.
Yeah.
But if know thyself is beginning of the journey, then you want to be the center and figure out who I am, because you're the hero of the story.
Yeah. It's also, I recently was, I forget where I was reading this. I wish I remember. But it was about how this thing happens for some people in their, usually in their 40s or 50s. And it's this new chapter of your life where you are not the center. And it's this, and like you notice, you start to get rid of things. You start to, it's this disillusionment because you spent this whole first part of your life building up this idea of who you are and in the world, and then you spend the second part of your life completely disassembling all of that, not in a very positive way, not in like a
right.
And I find it interesting that same way that it works with a lot of these glamours.
Exactly. So if we move to the next one, which is number 5. The glamour of environing conditions, leading frequently to a sense of frustration or futility or of impotence. Mm. So you blame it on stuff outside.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for this, I could do this.
Right.
Or it's, the fault of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We definitely get into that. That's almost epidemic currently. Of this blaming anyone but I guess it's a responsibility. Like
it is.
Are you deferring your responsibility for the management of your own energy and time to somebody else?
Yeah, when I make a statement, well, it's all the fault of ...
Yeah.
And that is pointing outside at somebody else, then I've missed the point of my part in it and my relationship to life.
Yeah.
The next one's interesting because it's the glamour of the mind. Mm. The glamour of the mind and of its efficiency and its capacity to deal with any or every problem. This leads inevitably to isolation and loneliness. Mm.
Yeah, that's another. We've never been more connected and we've never been more alone. So it's It's a interesting perspective.
Well, if I'm locked up in my own mind, then I'm alone with my thoughts because I'm not part of a common field of awareness, which is what the intuitive plane is. The Buddhic plane, if you like, technically speaking, where all things are unified. The mind, as we understand it in this respect, is still sees itself as isolated because it has a function to perform.
Yeah.
But the glamour of the mind, we get caught up with its efficiency and I can deal with anything. Just give me a problem, I can handle it. I'm very good at problem solving. But are you good at being part of community? Are you good at allowing the collective wisdom to flow into the field? I mean, so the mind can isolate, and we get locked in an ivory tower sometimes.
And we're also sort of, we have such a narrow spectrum of visible light. If you use that as an analogy, and we think that we have this command and control over. We really have a firm understanding of all this. And then you realize it's just a tiny sliver of the energy that's out there. And it's like so.
Well, goes back to. We need all the pixels on the screen. And by the way, if we're one pixel, then we need all the pixels on the screen to have the collective understanding.
That's right. Yeah.
It's, pixel fixation. Man.
That's right.
So, you'll love the next one, Joey. You've already named it.
Yeah.
The glamour of devotion. Leading to an undue stimulation of the astral body. The man or woman thus glamoured sees only one idea, one person, one authority, and one aspect of the truth. It feeds fanaticism and spiritual pride. The reason this is a big one is because each nation has a soul ray and a personality ray. The soul ray of the United States is the second ray of love wisdom, basically a benevolent, beneficent force. Personality ray that gives expression to that is the sixth ray of idealism and devotion. And we've mentioned before that when that is functioning in its higher aspect, it's really stays on course. It's true. It lives in integrity. When it's in its lower aspect, it becomes fixed on only one. It has to be this, whether it's a religious extremism, political extremism, social whatever. It becomes an extreme point of view, which is, if you like, dogma and fanaticism. So the inherent danger of anyone with this in their equipment is that you can easily get fixated on that what you believe is the only way of seeing things, and everyone else is a non-believer and a heretic and should be destroyed.
Yeah. And then we're sort of dealing with those cards right now. So,
we are, and we're dealing with them around the whole world because we've just come out of Pisces, which was governed by the sixth ray of idealism and devotion. And all the enlightened beings manifest the highest aspects of the sixth ray. And then we, humanity, played out some of the lower aspects, and we're still dealing with the dregs of that. So I find this one really important, the glamour of devotion.
Yeah, because that can spin very quickly out of hand. I mean, that sort of leads to the moral panic and the sort of mob-like activity.
Well, yeah. You could even burn witches,
Yeah, exactly.
Spanish Inquisition. And nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
That's right. What a show.
So two more desires. There are many more desires, but he named the 9 to consider. I mean, that's quite an assignment
yes, it is.
for one lifetime.
That is really, I mean, even just dealing with one of these is a victory if you've managed to do that in a lifetime. But it's most people are not ready for that, and if you are, then you should really pursue it.
So once you remove a distortion from the emotional plane, a glamour,
Yeah.
you then have a clearer lens through which the mind can see. It's not like the Hubble telescope that had to go up and sort of fix it because it was myopic.
Right. That's a good point.
The glamour of desire. The glamour of desire with its reflex action upon the physical body. This leads to a constant condition of fighting and of turmoil. It negates all peace and fruitful work and must someday be brought to an end.
Ooh, that's interesting. Like the end of desire? Is that what he's saying?
The desire of the lower nature.
Okay.
Because one of the things I've been aware of, that the word desire has gotten a bad rap.
I was going to say that it needs almost a reformulation.
So what I've been doing is, when we talk about the will of God, instead of the will of God, I've been calling the dream of God, or whatever it is that lives at the heart of the Creator. I've been calling it the deep desire of the Creator.
I guess I have more of a computation. I think of it more of a what's the hypothesis that God is testing.
Right.
Like what is like? Because for me it was always hard to, like, the dream of God was always hard to wrap my head around.
Well, you're talking about the desire of God to know itself.
Yeah.
But when the desire is if you like, captured by emotions, it becomes an earthly passion.
Right.
Now, you can lead passionate lives, but when your passions rule, they're not the best navigational aids.
Yeah, that's true.
So you don't remove the deep desire to know. That's one of the words of power, is to know. It's one of the callings to know, to know thyself. That was what Pythagoras says, man, know thyself.
But it is the desire and will are two things that are kind of interesting and touchy kind of subject, depending on how you define them.
I think in this instance, we're talking about desire as there is this deep call, magnetic call to know more about what life is.
Yeah, I mean, to make it personal, I mean, I've been going through this thing where I'm noticing this disillusionment, the delusionment of desire. It's like I used to have such strong desires in terms of I knew that I wanted to do certain things. I wanted to go see, experience certain things. And that disillusionment has, it's almost like it's less material, more internal, and it seems to follow that same track of wanting to know myself better while getting rid of this idea of myself. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yes, it does.
I mean, it's a disillusionment of the ego, but also in some ways desire. Like it's, there's a. I guess this is something, especially any younger listeners will understand, the idea of FOMO, fear of missing out. That was my main driving function for probably the first 30 years of my life. Like I would, if there's something to do, I wanted to do it. Or now it's the complete opposite. It's like the joy of missing out.
Well, and for me, it's like, I've got to go there. I've got to travel there. I've got to go to that country. I've got to do that.
Yeah.
And now I'm realizing, but I'm here. Here is the location on the planet.
Yeah.
The grass is always greener somewhere else, or it used to be. Oh, I've got to go there to get this experience.
Yeah.
I had that experience. I was traveling in the East in the late 60s, and I think I was in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iran. And once again, this is my, I think, second time back to Asia to find the truth, the whole journey. And I bumped into an astrologer in Kabul in Afghanistan who basically said, well, but you were incarnated in the West. Why are you roaming around here? And it was a very innocent question. I went, oh, maybe I should go back. And so I went back. I was living in Sweden at the time. I went back to Stockholm with that ringing in my ears. That's when I walked into the bookstore in Stockholm and walked into the back room of this secondhand bookstore. And there on the shelf were 6 Alice Bailey books.
All right.
And they were $40. I had $50 to my name. I walked out with a package of 6 books and $10 to my name.
Oh, wow.
So if I hadn't returned back, I would have never bumped into a path that I've been following that's been very useful. At the same time, not getting caught up in the glamour of following the path.
Right. Yeah.
But that was the whole thing of it's an inner journey. But in order to get that, I had to do all the running around and not missing out on stuff.
Yeah.
I think what you're doing is like, being here now means you're everywhere in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's really the first time in my life where I've been okay with being in one place for it's the longest I've ever lived somewhere in my adult life. So it's quite a change. But rather than feeling this urge to move somewhere else, I'm actually having the urge to be still.
Which is not to be confused with being sedentary or being apathetic.
It's none of those things. That's where it's interesting. What I was trying to say, this disillusionment of desire, but without being apathetic, it's still like a great desire to create and to be a part of a community and to do all these things. For instance, this podcast. But it's for the very first time, I think it's been able to center and hold.
For me, Joey. Because I've gone through a similar process, I don't get this itch, oh my gosh, it's time to leave. I better leave now. I've been here X number of years or whatever. It's just, I'm here. In time and space, you've got to be in some coordinate.
Yeah, that's true.
If you're incarnated, your body has to be somewhere in some place in the now.
Right.
I'm here.
Yeah.
So let's use the here and now for the journey.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not an external hero's journey anymore.
Yeah.
It's the revelation of the kingdom of God within. You mean I don't? God, it's cheaper, in fact. Save on airfares.
Yeah, there you go. That's true.
So anyway, let's wrap up this part of our podcast with number 9.
Okay.
Number nine, the glamour of personal ambition. There are many other glamours, both individual and worldwide, but these will serve to indicate a general tendency. It's saying, this wraps it all up. It's the glamour of personal ambition. And yet you've got to light a fire at some point to get the thing going. So you light the fire and you become important, and you're on an important journey, and everything is important.
Right.
But if you carry on in that vein, you're going to live in a world of illusion and glamour. It lights your fire. So ambition gets you off the dime. It sets you in motion. But ambition for me is different than this longing to be of service or this deep desire to know and be myself, my true self. Ambition, I think, in this case is, well, we equate it with, we went back to the American dream. The ambition then is, in order for me to show that I have fulfilled this dream, I live in a house that has so many thousand square feet. I'm not using that in an accusatory way. It's just that I've been in that world with people in that world, particularly people in the corporate world who end up being vice presidents and having like 10, 12,000 people reporting to them, and they feel probably lonelier and life is more difficult than ever before. Not everyone, but what it shows is that the image of happiness and success that I held is not the true one, because I'm still hungry. And we go back to the big test that humanity is facing at the moment, the big first initiation. Man cannot live by bread alone. I can have this wonderful job, I can earn all this money, I can have all these houses, I can have all this, and yet I'm still hungry.
Mm.
And no material food can fill this hunger. That is what we're at. At the moment, we don't believe that. So what do? You binge.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So humanity is binging at the moment on all the addictive substances.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying that just as an observation, not as a judgment, because I've been there.
Mm.
So when you look at glamour, it really is a distortion. And because it's the waters of the astral plane, you know that if you have a glass of water and you put a stick in the water, and then it looks as though where the stick and the water and the air meet, looks like the stick, it's bent.
They don't
There's a refractive quality to water. There is a refractive quality to the conditioned waters of the astral human plane. Nothing can be seen clearly as it is.
Right, because being that we're mostly made up of water, we are by nature refractive.
So it's sort of like a hall of mirrors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I hadn't really thought of it until just now. But yeah, we by definition we are seeing things through a refractive lens. So it's not exactly what's there. So plan accordingly.
What is the lens that you can see clearly with? It's the eyes of the heart.
Right.
It's the third eye. It's the eye that receives light directly from the deeper dimensions of life. And that's it. So I remember, God, way back when I was in my teens, I was hitchhiking. I got a ride out of London with somebody, and they were sort of quizzing me. This was somebody who wanted to see, what I thought I knew.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, if you saw something with their own eyes, would you believe it?
Mm.
And I said, I'm not sure. He said, well, no, if seeing is believing.
Mm.
Later on, when I got caught out in a whiteout, this blizzard, a snowstorm up in the Scottish mountains, leading a group, and realized that what I thought I saw was the mountain we were heading to. And in fact, it was just a big 20-foot mound of snow about 50 yards away.
Right.
That's when I went, seeing is not believing, because I'd lost my depth perception, my orientation, and we nearly went over an edge.
Yeah.
And I had to revert back to map and compass and go blind.
Right.
So seeing is not believing with the earthly eyes, but with the eyes of the heart, we register the truth.
Yeah.
I guess that's really what it's about. So if we can bring it back to where we started, Joey, we're talking about the rebuilding of our society, the rebuilding because, like LA, those parts that are burnt to the ground, they've got to be rebuilt. We've got parts of our society that are falling apart because the systems that hold them in place no longer serve. We've got to do a major upgrade. It's a regeneration of humanity. And the way that we look at it here at the Mount, we say, if you're going to build a new house, it's got to be built on solid foundations. And that's where we go back to our three principles of essential divinity, goodwill, and unanimity. Is when we understand that each one of us is an aspect of the one life, a fractal, a pixel in the mind of the Creator. When we know that love is really the true currency and the true source of happiness. And when we know that we're all part of one integrated system of life, unanimity. So that's the work we're doing here in our own sort of small way. It is seeking to create new dreams, new visions of the world, not distorted, but basically saying, what does love look like in a society? How does the financial system reflect love? And the two words that we've used recently is this new society we're seeking to build should characterize caring and sharing. Caring and sharing are very difficult if you have the planet of self at the center of the universe.
Yeah.
So a pre-Copernican mindset doesn't allow you to build what Martin Luther King called beloved community.
That's right. Yeah.
beloved community is a constellation of lives working together in harmony.
Yeah.
And that's where we're headed.
That's right.
And in order to see clearly, we've got to remove the mist, the distortions. And they live inside of us. Can't blame anyone else, Joey.
That's right.
That's what I've learned. It's all your fault.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Michael, that was great. That really hits home, and I think it's so timely, especially with everything that's going on. This is 2025 is the examination of these glamours.
And if we don't remove the glamours so we can see more clearly, we're going to attempt to recreate something, and we go back to Groundhog Day. We're going to go back to round the block again.
Yeah.
Because we know that life moves in a spiral movement. And a spiral is a circle that is constantly being elevated. And you elevate it through aspiration, through pure desire. If you don't have that desire, or if you're still locked in wanting to recreate what you had before because you can't afford to lose it, you are going to recreate the same model that's going to fail.
Yeah.
This is not progress. It's illusion. It's glamour.
It's glamour. Whew. Wow. All right.
Okay, Joe.
Well, thank you, Michael. That gave us a lot to think about, and it's very timely. Really
I think we've got a list of assignments here. Like, if you look at those 9 glamours, it's like, okay, what can I do to remove the stuff inside of me that is not allowing me to see clearly, myself clearly, others clearly, and to be able to create something new. And I go back to this wonderful quote from Agni Yoga: when I begin to listen with the ears of the heart, see with the eyes of the heart, and then give from the heart. A heart-centered community is a community where the self isn't at the center. The heart is at the center, and the heart is not a personal possession. The heart is a universal organ that each of us has been given. It's what ensures that we're in touch with life. So that's why I believe that the heart is the portal to the new society, the new civilization that we have to build. So as well as getting rid of all the glamours that we just named, I believe we have to enter through the portal of the heart if we're going to stand in a new place together.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Joey.